Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Monir El Azzouzi from easymedicaldevice.com. And today we'll talk about artificial intelligence. If you have seen the July update that I have made, there are a lot of discussion about artificial intelligence within all the member states. And we'll talk specifically today about specific artificial intelligence legislation, which is called the AI Act, so Artificial Intelligence Act. And I have with me Erik Vollebregt from Axon Lawyers to talk about that. So Erik, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Thanks very much for having me. As you can see, I have my special MDR 2024 background enabled.
So yeah, the road is stopping. So maybe it's the time where everybody will have to stop selling their devices then, I suppose. So Erik, today we'll talk about AI Act. I have, and we read that also during the July update. So the report that you have made, so Axon has made with Hugi Mestre and partners. It was really an interesting report. I read it, and when I looked at it, it looked like an internal audit or an audit from a notified body report with all the non-conformances or things that are maybe not working. So I wanted to maybe not to discuss all the report because really it's a big one, just discuss maybe some of the details, but maybe for the audience first, we talk a lot about EU MDR, IVDR, UK CA. I mean, we start to have a lot of legislation on our background. Now we talk about AI Act. So is it a new layer, if I can say, on our tools of legislation, or what it is exactly? What is it talking about exactly?
Well, first of all, thanks for the kind words about the report. We had a lot of fun writing it, I can tell you. It's also important to emphasize that the report discusses the status of the AI Act in its Commission proposal, so the initial proposal. And maybe we'll touch upon that later, but there's a lot of work going on both in the Parliament and in the Council with possible amendments. So if you read the report, then read it for the structural issues, because a lot of these small details may be changing over time, because it discusses a proposal that's already under change, so to speak. But still, as I've seen myself, I've been tracking the proposed amendment so far, and a lot of the issues that we pointed out in the report are not fixed. So the report is still very relevant in a lot of aspects. As to your question about, what does it do? What does the AI Act do? Basically, of course, for medical devices and for IVDs, we have either the MDR or the IVDR as the core piece of legislation. But as most people will be aware, if you have a medical device, the MDR or the IVDR is not the only regulation that applies to your device. Because, for example, if you have a device that processes patient data, GDPR applies. If you have a medical device that contains chemicals, then the REACH regulation will apply. If you have a device that runs on electricity, then the EMC and the low voltage directives would formally apply, but there is a conflict mechanism between the MDR and the IVDR that ensures that you don't get double application of these two pieces of legislation. Double application is also something we'll discuss probably later. But the AI Act, you could say, is an attempt, and that's a deliberate phrasing of the EU to sort of carve out its place in the normative space for artificial intelligence worldwide. And why am I saying that? Well, because the EU doesn't have, you could say, a lot of influence in the world, in the sense that the EU doesn't have an army, although that might change with the current developments. The EU is still not, let's say, a single country or federation. So how does the EU exercise influence in the world? By exporting standards and legislation, basically. They've been spectacularly successful with that, with the GDPR, for example. basically everybody in the world knows the GDPR. The GDPR is a benchmark for lots of other legislation in the world. And my feeling is that they tried to replicate this with the AI regulation somehow. Because the AI regulation, it's a horizontal piece of legislation, so it applies to basically every kind of device or software that implements methods, software methods that qualify as artificial intelligence under the regulation. And the definition of artificial intelligence under the regulation is really, really broad. Basically, the threshold is so low that everything that is currently software as a medical device in the meaning of MDCG 2019-11, just because it has an algorithm in it, is basically covered in scope of the AI regulation, which is very counterintuitive, by the way, because this is not how most people understand artificial intelligence. Now, again, why a horizontal piece of legislation? Because they basically want to regulate everything from autonomous Terminator robots for the battlefield to basically educational apps that teach children languages, for example, or house or your Roomba with that has artificial mapping of the ground floor of your house, for example. So it's really, really, really broad, and because it's really, 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 really broad, they used also, you could say, really broad strokes in the way they propose to regulate artificial intelligence. And if you do that, then there's all kinds of things, interfaces with existing regulation that may not work as, or that may have some unexpected side effects, which is basically what we try to pick apart for the MDR and the IVDR in the report that you mentioned.
So actually the EU MDR, with the change of the EU MDR, we talk more about software applications. We have a specific rule now with the software, when before it was more class 1, now it's class 2A to B until 3 if there is a death of somebody, for example. There is a lot of MDCG guidance also about software. There is a lot of information about software. The notified bodies are learning now software so that they can certify companies with software. So we are progressing a lot in the EU MDR for that. So do we need the AI Act, if I can say, for what we are trying to do now with software? Or for us, the EU MDR is sufficient and there is no need to add anything above it or aside to it?
Well, that's a good question, because that's basically the position I've been defending recently at the MedTech Summit, for example, that for MDR and IVDR purposes, that's also one of the conclusions in the report, artificial intelligence is basically just another technique for implementing digital technology, right? So, and also under the MDR and the IVDR, artificial intelligence systems for healthcare are already being approved. So we don't need a specific new legislative instrument for that. And what we definitely don't need, I think, is a new legislative instrument that's just going to cause a lot of additional homework, because the way basically it is set up, as you mentioned, risk classification for software under the MDR and the IVDR in the good old 1 to A to B3 classification. Well, the AI Act uses a different risk classification system, basically saying we have two types of AI. We have low risk and high risk AI. And high risk AI is basically everything with a medical application. They say it a bit differently, because basically they say if the AI is a safety component in the solution in which it's deployed, then it is high risk, basically, which is basically the case for all medical devices software and all IVDR software, because if the algorithm fails, then of course, that creates safety risks. So the thinking is that they have a binary classification system in which they say everything low risk is self-certification, everything high risk needs to go through a notified body conformity assessment procedure, which you could say, well, is still not so much of a problem if this could be combined intelligently. But what they propose under the AI Act is that they are going to notify notified bodies for the AI Act. So that basically means MDR and IVDR notified body notification process all over. Well, we know how spectacularly successful that turned out, meaning that they might arrive at some system of competency codes for AI or not. That's not really clear in the regulation yet. But also the conflict mechanism between the CE mark under the AI Act and the CE mark under the MDR and the IVDR, that is where the problems start, because we also have overlapping CE marks, for example, for electronic medical devices with the ROHS directive, right? That's also a stacked CE mark. But at least ROHS is about something completely different. Whereas what the AI Act does is basically it looks at overlapping concepts like risk management for the performance of the AI, for example, which is squarely in the middle of the clinical evaluation and risk assessment under the MDR. Well, then they have an intelligent, between quotation marks, solution in the AI Act where they say, yeah, you know what, but then you can do overlapping technical documentation. Well, that might be an idea, except that the AI Act defines quite a number of concepts from the new legislative framework. So the market surveillance regulation and the Blue Guide, the new 2022 version as well. It defines these concepts differently.
So which can create conflicts to manufacturers. So they will have a question, should we do it in that way or on that way? Because this is saying that, this is saying something else. So which one should I go for?
How the freak are you ever going to have overlapping technical documentation with defined concepts that mean different things in different parts of the technical documentation? I mean, this is really, as a lawyer, it just makes me want to bang my head on my desk until bleeding. I haven't done that, but I mean, it is so badly thought out, and that's probably because they tried to make this insanely broad, one-size-fits-all instrument.
Exactly.
But then, I mean, if you do that, then yeah, you would really think that they do this in a more intelligent way. Like, for example, one of the proposals we made in the report is, look, if you are going to go down this road, that you are going to pose additional requirements for hazards that are not properly addressed in vertical regulation that incorporates AI as technology, okay, that can happen. Then what you could do is use a conflict mechanism that's already in the MDR and the IVDR that says that is aimed at the machinery directive. Because machinery is also, it's a technical concept, right? It's big moving parts that can eat somebody alive or take your hand or fingers or feet or whatever. And in Article 1 of the MDR and the IVDR, that's the article where you have all these little conflict mechanisms. You could also say, look, what we do is you get a single CE mark under the MDR and the IVDR, because that's the most specific regulation for this product. And then, insofar as there are specific hazards related to the device that are not addressed in the MDR and the IVDR, but in horizontal legislation like the machinery directive, then you also have to address those hazards. So, for example, you could say, well, insofar, let's say, for example, we know that if you have deep learning AI, it can develop all kinds of really interesting and scary biases that it's not transparent about. Like, for example, it could develop a bias that all white males actually don't have a right to live, or they are worth 5 years of lifetime less than females, for example. Let's take an example like that. Well, if that happens, of course, you want to know this. Normally in the MDR, this is also something that would be, of course, very relevant for risk management and clinical performance. But if you say there is a more specific standard as regards AI bias in the AI Act, which there is, and there is a more specific standard in terms of transparency of the AI system to the user in the AI system, then you can say, okay, look, you have to look at these things as well under the MDR. Just like, for example, if you have a medical device with big moving, spinning parts that can eat somebody alive, like, for example, I don't know, an MRI with all these spinning parts in the donut.
Yeah.
Or you have a big, huge medical freezer or something like that.
Or a surgical robot or something that...
or a surgical robot. Then you also have to take specific parts of the machinery directive into account. That would have been a really intelligent solution. Unfortunately, this is something they completely, I'm not going to say ignored, because that means that you first need to think about it and then decide you're not going to do it. But these are things that haven't been really considered as far as I know. Because basically under the AI Act, the solution is double CE marks and additional notification of notified bodies. So basically maximum administrative complexity.
So as you said, and I understood that also by reading the report, and I really encourage people to read that just to have an understanding of what is happening there. So there are a lot of things that are or similar or duplicate. So you do it twice, or divergent. So it's more like things where you say, if it's similar, then it's fine. You can use the same documents. It's fine. If it's duplicate, you have to do it twice, like 2 technical files or 2 documentation, etc. And if it's divergent, I mean, here it's with this notified body, you say that, but with this notified body, you say something else, which is like a bit not counterproductive. So this is really how, if I can say, if we have the AI Act as of today, now, if you have it on the market, because it's just a draft. If we have it on the market now, this is what manufacturers will do, if I can say, to have those kind of double standards for everything.
Yes. And if I were a manufacturer, I would think twice about even going to the market in Europe under these conditions, because it's such a complete harebrained system. It's, if you want to maximally scare innovation away, this is worse than the Advanced Therapy Medicinal Products Regulation of 2007. This is really absolutely not the way to do it. I mean, I've heard Ursula von der Leyen say in speeches like, we did it the right way because we did it the European way.
Okay.
Which I think is a fantastic party line. But the European way of the artificial intelligence regulation, at this point, it doesn't display a lot of even natural intelligence, because it fits so badly with other NLF legislation for vertical that's already in place vertically. It's a bad idea. I mean, I really understand a lot of the, let's say, more philosophical and ethical concepts behind the AI Act, and I think they are fantastic to be regulated. Really good idea. But man, they should really have thought a bit more about how this regulation interfaces with other product legislation. I mean, if I can figure that out together with a couple of people in a couple of months and can write a detailed report about it like that, then my God, the Commission would be able to figure it out as well. I mean, these people are not stupid at the Commission. I don't know whether what the plan is there, that they basically don't care about the external effects of this legislation, or that they think like the European market is indispensable and it doesn't matter how complicated we think we make things, people will try and get approval anyway. It's I don't understand.
And as you've said, so it's the technique of one size fit everybody. So one size shoe size will fit everyone. So which is also what they tried to do at the beginning with EU MDR, with satisfying everybody. And then we see some consequences on some of the elements and changes. But yeah, this is mainly, I think, the technique. But now, if I am a manufacturer on this medical device field that is doing AI, should I do something, or should I just wait and listen, or what would you advise, if I can say, those manufacturers to do?
Well, since the European Parliament is still looking at this, although very recently, I think, what was it? Last month, the European Parliament's co-rapporteurs also published the amendments for their proposed amendments to the AI Act, which address none of the problems that actually we've been talking about in this podcast, but do address a lot of the other more fundamental horizontal problems. So I think they're good amendments, but it's way not enough to solve the problems for the medical devices industry. Same with the council. The council has also been looking at this, and they have been tinkering around with the definition of AI system a bit. It seems that they have solved one of the problems to a point of in-house produced AI. So if you have hospitals that develop AI as an in-house produced device, basically the AI said, those need CE marking as well. Well, that totally defeats the purpose of having a hospital exemption. So what they now did was basically they sort of redefined the definition of a high-risk AI system as, if you don't need to go to a notified body for your AI system under vertical legislation, then it is low risk under the AI Act, which is practical. But then you get it into the weird situation that you get different classification of the same AI system depending on whether it is used by a hospital, whether it's produced by a hospital, or whether it's produced by an external manufacturer. So that also creates all kinds of other problems, I would say. But anyway, so also the council is still working on it. I know that the previous presidency, the French presidency, had a very ambitious agenda on it, but this presidency is over. We're now in the Czech presidency. And I haven't really seen how ambitious the Czech presidency is on finishing this. I know that the Commission thinks that the timelines for the European Parliament's plenary vote will be around November this year. And that means that probably the Council will also, but that would be a first reading vote. And I know that the Council is also looking probably at aligning around that date. So to get back to your question, what should manufacturers do is basically, tell everybody that has any kind of influence in this discussion, so specifically member states. I mean, at least you can give credits to the Netherlands as a member state, because they had the sense to commission a report, the report that we just discussed, and insert it in the use it for the council discussions. But there are other member states that apparently don't see the urgency here and think this is a perfectly good horizontal instrument. So, what I can almost envisage happening here is that just to go, I think the GDPR is a really nice case study for this. So that's why I'm going back to the GDPR, because with the GDPR, we had a bit the same problem. It was also a very restrictive horizontal piece of legislation, which right almost to the end did not have any exemptions for scientific, medical scientific research. So a lot of people have been saying to the parliament and to the commission and the council in the lobby, like, hey guys, this is going to be a complete disaster, and clinical investigation will not be possible anymore. And basically the parliament was like, la, 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 we have Google in one ear, we have Facebook in another ear, we have the whole financial industry on our neck. We have bigger fish to fry than your medical stuff. And this did not start to move until they finally brought some cancer researchers into the European Parliament who explained to the European parliamentarians, like, hey, do you know actually that most of the cancer-related research is registries in Europe? And if you adopt the GDPR as it's currently planned, do you know that basically it will be impossible to perform most or more than 80% of the current oncological research in the EU? Is this the consequence that you want? And I think, so that is really how manufacturers and more broadly stakeholders can help the good people in the council and the parliament, because the commission should have subject matter experts, and you don't need a diploma to become a politician or a parliamentarian. It sounds a bit derogatory, but yeah, I mean, you can't know everything about everything. I'm very cognizant of that. So it's good to have a discussion that if you do something this way, then these are the consequences. So basically, not only have a very formal impact assessment, but really discuss about what happens if you use this rule. What does it mean for what stakeholders need to do, and what are we going to see in the market, rather than having to fix things on the fly later, as we've seen with the MDR, for example, which is a project that is currently under construction, currently being fixed on the fly. UDEMET timelines have moved yet again.
Yeah,
I mean, come on. It's becoming a total Achilles and the tortoise situation, where basically, yeah, we can never expect UDEMET to enter into force. So, and that's not something you want for artificial intelligence either. I mean, the EU has the ambition to become a world leader in artificial intelligence. Yeah. So then it should definitely not become a world champion obstruction to artificial intelligence by adopting legislation that makes it so hard to bring a product to the market that only really big companies can do it in the end. No, because big companies like Google and Facebook and whatever that have artificial intelligence, I mean, in the end, they have more resources than most European countries. They don't give a shit about this kind of legislation because they have the means to bring their products to the market anyhow.
Exactly. And so for manufacturers that are now listening to that, then mainly the best action to do first is to read or the AI Act or your report, to understand first what is happening there and what maybe can be a conflict or an impact to their industry.
Yeah, or any other good analysis. That's
fine. Or the idea is to have knowledge first, and then to talk, I mean, to bring that to the commission or to the parliament or wherever they can have somebody that can really push and say, as you've said for the cancer, the registry and etc., to say, if you do that, it kills my business, or if you do that, here is the impact. Because as you said, maybe they don't have a clue of what is happening on certain fields.
So much it kills my business, because this is something that we've seen a very big insensitivity on the European political level for. Rather, basically, it literally will kill patients, because these nice tools that are intended to improve patient outcomes won't be available here not for years after they've been available somewhere else. I think that's the problem. And also, I mean, artificial intelligence, by definition, it's such a highly mobile employment market. You are going to make it impossible to do this in Europe. Where will the people go? They will all go to the US, or they will go to South America, or they will go to China or Japan or to Australia, everywhere but the EU. I mean, we've seen it with the AT&T regulation. after they adopted that regulation, it was almost impossible to bring an ATMP to the market in the EU. So the whole business model of small and medium enterprises changed to basically making a concept of a minimally viable theoretical product and then selling yourself to a big pharmaceutical company that's usually not even European. So, I mean, if that is what they intend, then they will have great success with this regulation. But if you read the recitals, that's not the idea. So I think they should do some work to align what they want from the regulation and what the regulation will do.
No, I think it's clear. And as you heard, maybe, as I've said, if you are in the AI business, and I'm working with some companies on the AI business, so I will inform them to listen carefully to this podcast. If you hear about that, so yes, this can have an impact to you. So if you don't want to move, as Erik said, to the US or to South Africa or Asia, and you want to stay in Europe, so then maybe, it's a good point here to alert the authorities or alert the commissioner or anybody to say that this can maybe have a big impact and that you have to change that. But as you said also, the presidency now is the Czech presidency, so I don't know if this is the priority for them or not, or maybe it will be still moved to the next presidency. So there will be still other things, but acting now will help to shape a regulation that makes really sense and not just a document that will be blocking innovation and blocking you. So I hope it's a clear message for everyone. Erik, something else on the AI Act, or I think we have covered everything here?
I mean, I could bang my head on my desk if you like, but it's not a good experience on a podcast for the listeners, I would say.
No, please.
I can teach the listeners some new Dutch swear words to describe what I think about this regulation. But no, I mean, I can joke about it, but it in the end, I think it's just really, really sad. I would say that something as important and also as competitively important for the European market really deserves a better plan behind it. So that also means that this regulation just needs to be better, because I cannot imagine that these problems are limited to the medical devices and ODDs arena. So, I mean, of course, it's good that they regulate horizontal aspects of AI that are not regulated in other regulations. Like, for example, addressing the very fundamental question, like what should AI-powered mass surveillance systems be like, and what kind of regulations should they meet? Fantastic, really good idea. But if you are going to, if it's going to have such a broad scope, then you really need to be careful that it doesn't create a lot of collateral damage in a particular area, which it really stands to do for medical devices and IVDs.
No, I think it's clear, and what you are describing here is explaining a specific thing, but that can impact also other fields, and we make something special for that. But for example, if we make a surveillance system, AI surveillance system in the hospitals for all the patients, maybe it will act also impact on that also. So it's something that we have to look carefully for each field and each activities here. Okay, so Erik, thank you for that. Everything will be on the show notes. I placed also the report on the show notes. I tried to get it again from the government address, but it didn't work. So I uploaded it and put it on my website. Then I put it there. So just click on the show notes and you get that. If there is any update or major update anywhere before it's implemented or it's there, I will do again another podcast episode to talk about that, to see if they took into account your report.
We will know more by, I don't know, October, November, because that's when the dust will start to settle in the Parliament and the Council.
Okay, great. So thank you, Erik. Thanks for all the help. And if you are listening to this podcast, don't hesitate to go on the show notes. Don't hesitate also to put a like or a comment. And if there is any question, I will send that directly to Erik. And don't hesitate also to follow us on the LinkedIn. We are also providing a lot of information. Myself and Erik also. I'm also following Erik, and he's always providing updates. So don't hesitate to follow us also on LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn is also on the show notes, so don't hesitate for that. Okay, Erik. So thank you very much, and I wish you a nice day.
Very welcome. Same to you.